the numbers are starting to level off. Looks like we're just over 60 people here. So I think we're okay to get going here. So again, thank you very much for joining us on a Monday morning to talk about new features on the Open Government Portal and on the Open Government Registry. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are 60 people on the call, so if you can sort of pay attention and keep yourself muted, unless you're talking, that'd be appreciated. The less amount of sort of feedback and noise, the better. Makes it a more enjoyable session, and it makes the recording of the meeting more consumable. I'll also say that this meeting is being recorded, and we'll share the video afterwards for folks to refer back to. So keep that in mind. If you don't necessarily want to have your camera on and your sort of likeness being visible in the video, feel free to keep your camera off, that type of thing. Other things. The session today is going to be in English. But feel free to ask questions in French. My colleague Damien is on the call to help out with sort of some translation if we need to answer questions in French. I mean, I'll certainly do my best to understand the questions in French, but I'll probably respond in English. And my colleague Damien can follow up with French responses. Okay, I think that's enough of a introduction. I think we can go and get into the material here. So, what are we going to talk about today? So building on what we talked about last time, today we're going to talk about how to use the new data previews in the registry and why would, users want you to use those features. We'll do a quick recap of what we talked about last session, just sort of a quick overview in case certain folks weren't able to make it last time. Then we'll talk about the table view in particular. We'll talk about the text view, and then we will talk about the image view. And then we should have plenty of time for wrap up and questions. The content of today's session is a little bit, I don't know, there's just less content to talk about this time. Hence, we're only doing an hour this morning, as opposed to the 2 hours that we did last week. If you missed last week's presentation and are interested in having the materials, they're available here at this link. I can I thought I would be able to put it in the chat. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat for anyone who wants to have it. And while I do that, so should have the link there in the chat, and we'll post today's presentation as well as the accompanying video there shortly after the meeting as well. Okay, let's get into it. So we saw this slide in the last session, but I wanted to recap this as well. Let me move this little doodad thing here. There you go. So here on the Open Government Portal team, we're trying to go from being just a simple metadata catalog and increase the amount of data management features that we have on the Open Government Portal and on the registry, with a sort of view of becoming an end-to-end data management platform. When we launched the Open Government Portal back in 2013, really the only functionality available was to add metadata about data sets. Then when we moved to the cloud in 2018, we were able to offer a new functionality called the file store, where you were able to both input your metadata as you did before, but also upload files directly to our cloud storage. Now, in this sort of file store, there was no semantic understanding of the data itself. It was really just like a Dropbox or a Google Drive where there was storage enabled, but really no semantic understanding of what that data is, meaning how many columns are in that data set, what are the column titles in that data set, how many rows are in that data set, for example. That type of thing isn't part of the file store functionality, but it does allow you to upload files, which is great if you're in a situation where you don't have easy access to the IT resources needed to host your data sets someplace. Next, we launched the functionality called Data Store. We launched this sort of at the end of the summer, last summer, and we've kind of been sort of, I don't know, testing that, slowly implementing that functionality over time. And with these training sessions that we've been happy to offer, this is sort of like really the first time that we've been sort of popularizing this with departments, and then hoping that folks will take advantage of that. In Data Store, you have the same functionality around metadata where you can describe your data sets, but in this case, you can actually load your tables into a data set, into a database rather. This unlocks the functionality where the system can understand what can understand the data a little bit, understand what are the columns, what types of data are contained in each columns, how many rows are in the data sets, for example. This unlocks a bunch of new functionality, such as being able to query the data using an API, as opposed to just being able to query the metadata, the data about the data in the past. Now you can actually query the data itself. You can also preview data directly on the page, which is really the content of today's presentation. And then there's things like data dictionaries, some validation also built in. As we continue on this sort of path of offering more data management functionality, there will be more features coming. For example, there's a functionality called Table Designer that we're still in the development process for, which we expect later this year, but we won't talk about that one in detail today. All right. Next slide. So we're just going to quickly recap over the functionalities that we talked about last time. So the first one is data validation. So in this function, when you upload CSV data into the Open Government Registry, we'll now validate that data using a library called Good Tables that's going to check, hey, is this data a properly structured CSV? And this allows us to ensure that we're going to only serve things using the from the API and do previews only on things that are going to be able to be outputted in a coherent way from the system. So this functionality is available now. If you're uploading a CSV directly into the registry, you'll see a validation badge, whether it's valid or invalid, and a corresponding report to go along with that. Next, to recap, once your data is validated, you're able to query that data using an API. The portal automatically creates an API endpoint, and you're able to query that data using the instructions provided if you click the Data API button. Yeah. And to recap, once data is loaded into the data store, the system can convert that into a few different file formats. So you're going to start by uploading a CSV, and then a public user, could consume that in comma separated values, tab separated values, JSON, or XML. And because we know that the data that you've uploaded is properly structured, it's able to do those file conversions using sort of simple logic. Okay. Oh, and then the last recap. Last recap is the data dictionaries. So when you upload a CSV to the data store and it passes validation, the system will automatically generate a simple data dictionary. At the minimum, it'll sort of give you the column names and what data types they're stored in the database as. And additionally, like you can go in, edit, add more content to that data dictionary, such as labels, descriptions, and really flesh that out into a full data dictionary for the table. I see a question. Will you be sharing the link to the presentation? So I shared the link to where the presentation from last time is shared in GC Collab. Yeah, and thanks, Annette. We'll be posting this presentation to that same location in GC Collab shortly after this presentation. Okay, so that's the end of the recap. Now we're going to get into the meat of today's presentation, which is to talk about the data previews. So going forward, certain data that's been uploaded into the registry cloud storage can now be previewed directly on the page. Lots of different benefits to having a preview there, for one, and we'll talk about the sort of benefits for each type, depending on the particular type of preview that we're doing. But really, it allows a user to browse and consume the data directly in their browser without having to download a file. There are currently 3 different previews available in the registry. The first one is the table view. That previews a CSV dataset or a CSV resource in a tabular view, and it relies on the data being validated, as we talked about just previously in the recap and then last session. There's also the text view, which is used to display either plain text or certain types of sort of code files. The text view can display JSON, GeoJSON, XML, RDF, and provide sort of basic syntax highlighting. So here, for example, is a JSON, and you can see it kind of gives you that key value syntax highlighting, just to make it a little bit more easy to consume that. It'll also sort of print it and format it in that way, so that it's like broken up, a little bit easier to read, that type of thing. In addition, there's also image view, which we're really excited about. In this case, it can display PNG, JPEG, and GIF images on the page, and it has an interface where you can enter your alt text so that we can display images in a way that respects the web accessibility standards. So those are the three previews that we're going to talk about today, and we'll jump into them in a little bit more detail. So first one we're going to talk about is the table view. This here on screen is kind of what the table view looks like. And you'll see there's quite a few different buttons and functionalities here. So we'll just go and sort of explain what those functionalities are, and then we'll show one in a more sort of interactive way. So I guess we'll start here on the top right. So when you have this table view, you're also able to open it full screen in a new tab. This just allows for a bigger view on the data table itself. You can refine the preview based on a column value, meaning you can add a filter. So if I click this add filter button, I can drill down in this, or like refine this preview column or preview table to only show records where a certain column value is presented. Say, for example, if I wanted to show only the rows where Carl Jackson was the program manager, I'd be able to add that filter and see only that there. Once I've added a filter, I can download just the extract of the rows that I'm interested in. We think that this is going to be super useful for big data sets where, hey, I only want to see whatever, the things where Carl Jackson is the program manager, and then have that file, being able to download it. We feel like that's a functionality that users are going to like. Also, you can hide or unhide columns. So I might have like a whole bunch of columns in a table, and I only might be interested in a certain subset of those columns for my analysis. So I can hide or unhide the columns. That allows it for like more of a less cluttered view, but also I can download that extract with only those columns that I'm interested in. I can also do a simple text search within the data set. So if I am looking for something, I can type something into that search box and it will refine rows that contain, it will refine the table to rows that contain that text. Just a very simple text search, but allows you to refine as well as to refine the table, but also drill down and actually find things within the data set. In addition, you can also sort by column values using the sort of up and down button here in the table. But one thing to note about that is it requires that the right data type be selected in the data dictionary. We talked about this in the last session where you would go in, modify your data dictionary for a table, and then select, hey, this column is of type numeric, or this column is of type date stamp. In order to get the proper sorting of the columns, you do need to go in and select the right data type. If you don't, if say for example you don't go do that, for it loads everything as type text, which is fine. So it like you can sort alphabetically in the columns, but if you try and sort a numeric column alphabetically, it'll give you kind of a weird results, and we'll take a look at that in a bit more detail. So that's the functionality of the table view. We can look at this in a little bit more detail. So how would you actually go about adding one of these to the Open Government Registry? And it's fairly straightforward. We can actually show this in the registry rather than just talking about it. 1 second, switch the windows around here. So if I look at a data set that I've created in the registry, and I say, hey, here's my resource. It's been properly validated, so I know it's valid. At this point, I can, and it's of type CSV, I can add a preview to that. In order to add that preview, fairly straightforward, you would go to the edit, and then you would see this tab at the top called Views. This Views tab will be there, and you can go and you can say, hey, I would like to add a new view. And then there's 2 types of views available for this one, but in this case, you're interested in the table view. And then here, you're going to add a name for your view. And you can provide some more description of what that view encompasses. You can also select what columns are going to appear in that view. One sort of particularity of the data store, the the underlying piece that that enables this functionality is that it automatically adds a column called ID to your data set. This is really just a line number. And you could choose to either display or not display that ID column in the data set. So if I don't want to have that, I can just unselect it and then add my view. When it comes to what type of title to add to a view, I recommend for in most cases, I found it to be effective to just call it, if you're adding a table view, just call it table view. For example, table view, and then, you know, the same in French. And for the most part, if I'm not doing anything particular, such as applying a filter or anything like that, for the most part, you shouldn't need to add a description of what that view entails. By all means, you can add a description if you like, and you can add that description in English and French, and the description box supports Markdown formatting as well. So if we take a look at that, oops, yeah, I'm not going to save that one. I already have a preview enabled. So here, as we were talking about, we'll just go over some of those functions again. There's the option to open it full screen. So if I do that, I get a bigger view of the data. Say if I wanted to copy and paste it into Excel or something, having that bigger view makes it a little bit easier. You can select more, see more on screen, that type of thing. In addition, we can add a filter. So say, for example, I'm only interested in this particular data set, for example, is the Accessed Information Summaries data set. So say I only want to see ATI summaries from this year. I can add a filter where I select the column name of year and the value of 2022. And then it'll refine that. Table to just include records that have that value. You can see here in it'll say like showing 1 to 10, so it's showing 10 entries of 2,800 or so entries. So there's 2,800 records that meet that filter condition, and it says that's out of the 23,000 total entries. I can increase that. Say I want to show 100 on the page. I can make that selection there as well. And if I want to download just that selection, I can do that by clicking the download button, and it will enable all those formats that we talked about in the format conversion. So you can download it as a CSV, tab separated values, JSON, XML, etc. And I can add multiple filters as well. So say I only want to see, I've already added the filter for 2022, and maybe I only want to see summaries from my department, from Treasury Board. So I can add this owner org filter, and I can search for TEB, TBS. Just give it a second to refresh it. And then I can see, okay, it's showing me 115 of the 23,000. And if I want to download just that subset of the data and click CSV download, it will download for me, and I can open that up. And it will show, like it's only going to show in that extract the records that I've requested, and we can open that up and verify. Yes, I have my 115 or so. Yep, 116 with a header row of records that I've asked for. So you can see that you know, this might be super useful when you're when a user is trying to parse through, you know, a really big data set, or if it's a data set that has a fairly wide scope, you know, they can download just the stuff that they're interested in. Again, the hide and unhide columns also works for that functionality. So say, for example, maybe I don't care about any of the comments that might have been provided. I don't care about the UMD number, and I don't care about the disposition. You know, I can, again, download a subset of just the columns that I'm interested in. Additionally, there's also the search box. So if I want to refine it, and also then look for something to do with, maybe I only want records for deputy minister's breakfast. I can search, only tell me stuff about breakfast. And then, you know, I can download just that particular one. So we think that this is a fairly useful functionality that users will be excited to have. Also, just refresh that, get back to the main, to the unfiltered version. And I just wanted to also make a note about the data types. So in this example, I've gone and selected the right data types for the certain columns. So, you know, I've applied numeric when it's a numeric column, and then I am able to sort by, for example, number of pages, and it will give me an accurate sorting. If we just take a step back, and I have another example of the same data set here where I didn't do that, where I didn't go ahead and select the right data types. If I go to search by that same pages column, it's going to give me a kind of a weird, I don't know, weird behavior, I guess. Like, it's showing me 996 is the largest value, 996, 994, 99. Because what it's doing is it's sorting it alphabetically as opposed to sorting it in the proper numeric value. So just wanted to make sure that we showed that and highlight why it's worthwhile to take that extra step to add the correct data types in the data dictionary. Okay, just going to turn quickly to the chat. I'm seeing a question from Richard saying, I don't see the preview button on some data sets. Yeah, that's totally valid. You won't see that preview button unless, for one thing, unless a department has added it, or if you're, so on the Open Government portal, if a department hasn't enabled a preview on a data set, there won't be a preview available. If you're in the Open Government Registry and you are trying to add a preview to a data set and it's not coming up as an option, likely that data validation check hasn't passed, and that's probably the reasoning there. Looking at another question, why does it sort by numbers, not value? So to take us sort of step back, I guess, when it loads the data into the data store, it's going to generate this simple data dictionary, and it's going to tell you what data types are associated with each column. By default, just the sort of functionality of the system, it's going to load every column in as type text. So the system is smart enough to know that, hey, if I'm trying to sort by a column, it's going to check the data type. And so it's going to sort it alphabetically. Now, if I haven't gone in and changed these particular columns that only contain a numeric value to type numeric, it's going to just sort it alphabetically by a kind of weird alphabetical view of numbers. So just kind of to reiterate, go into the data dictionary and select the right data type if you're going to use the table preview for that. There's also it's also important from an API perspective. If a user wants to do an API query that returns maybe the sum of a column, if that correct data type isn't applied, those API queries won't work properly. Question from Annette: are there any published data sets that have the preview enabled yet, or is it still in the development stage? Yeah, there's a few data sets that have the previews enabled on the Open Government Portal publicly. Yeah, a few of them are related to proactive disclosure. For example, the government contracts data set has it enabled. Access to information summaries, a few other, yep, exactly, departmental audit committees as well. So there's a few there, but we're hoping that more and more of these will be available as as we've had the chance now to sort of popularize this with departments, to socialize it. We're hoping that people will go in and add previews to their data sets. Okay. Just gonna check back on the presentation here. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is it is possible to add multiple views on the same table within the table preview. So if you have a large data set that you sort of add to every year, you could consider offering multiple curated views on the same table. Having a few different views on the same table allows a user to see a couple different curated views, and I think that this might be a good trade-off for making it easy to consume a small amount of relevant data for a particular user, but also enable the ability for a more like sort of data savvy user to download the full data or to query the full data at one API endpoint. Let's take a look. Whoops. Let's take a look at what that would look like. So if I go back into the registry to my access to information summaries example, here I have one called multi previews. If I click preview here, so I have my typical table view. So different views will be contained in this tab interface on the data set. So I have my typical table view like we just talked about. And then I've also added a second tab called 2022 summaries. So here I've added a filter that provides convenient access to just the table, to just the summaries from 2022. And the way that you add that is not much different from how you would apply the filter on the front end, but we think that this might be useful for big data sets, particularly ones where like your users might come and say like they want to know just the Q1 numbers on a particular subject of data set that you add periodically. You can just provide this simple sort of view on the data to just the most recent period. So to add a second view on the same data set, we can try it maybe for this particular one here that only has one view applied. We can go in the registry to manage, go up to the views tab, and we can see there's already one view available there. And we can add a new view, and then we can call this one, maybe we just want to have 2021 summaries in this view. Well, add the French one as well, like that. And then I could provide a description. Saying this is just the 2021 data. I don't want, and then the real sort of functionality is enabled by this filters button. So I'm going to add a filter, and just like we saw on the front end, I'm going to go to the year, and I'm going to select the year that I want, 2021, and then that's applied. And I'm going to disinclude this ID column because it's more of a system thing than something I want to show to the users. Then I'm going to click add. Now I can see, hey, I have two views here. Now, if I want to reorder it so that my 2021 views show up ahead of the main view, I can just drag that to set the order that they appear in. Save that. Then I can go over here and click View Resource. And then here I have two views on the same data set. I have my 2021 data, I have my description that shows here, and then I also have, for folks who want the full data, I have it here as well. Yeah, so I think that's the bulk of what we were planning to talk about for the table views. We think that this is going to be appreciated by users of the Open Data Portal. We think that this is a pretty good, offers some pretty good functionality, and we're hoping that departments will experiment with using this. Just turning to the chat, could we send a few links of data sets that have a few previews enabled? There are a few in the chat now already, and there aren't that many extras other than that. So I think just the ones in the chat should be good. And then Annette is asking, is this view empty because the labels aren't filled in? I'm not sure. I can click on it. I'm not sure which I'm not sure which this is referring to. Let's take a look. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's meant by that question. Maybe we can save that one for the end and talk it back and forth. I clicked on that link and it says not available. I'm not sure about that. So I'm just going to advance in the presentation in the interest of time. The next view that we want to talk about is images. So we're excited about offering this new image view functionality. In the past, on the Open Government Portal, we've struggled to come up with a way to add images in a way that respected web accessibility standards. So in the past, like when you were only able to download a file, we've tried a few different things like creating a separate sort of text document for the alt text that goes along with an image. But again, like that is sort of dubious interpretation of what the web accessibility standards are. So we feel by offering this new image view, you'll be able to add an image along with the appropriate description in alt text. So we're super excited about that. We're hoping that folks who have relevant images that they would like to release on the Open Data Portal will make use of this image view. To add an image view is very straightforward, it's very much the same functionality as the table view. So you're going to upload your image file. The image preview supports JPEG, GIF, and PNG. Then you're going to go to the Views tab on that resource and then select Image View. And you're going to want to provide a description and a title of the image for accessibility purposes, as well as, just for general usability of that as well. Let's take a look at what one of those looks like in the registry. If I go back to my, oops. If I go back to my example that we were talking about, and if I go down to an image, here I have one called heart diagram. So here I have, my image that I uploaded in JPEG. I gave it a descriptive name called heart diagram. And then here I would add my description of the image, a diagram of a heart, including this type of thing. If you were to release this, actually, you might want to include a little bit more than I did here, but the point is there. To add this, pretty straightforward. You would upload your image into the registry. Once it's uploaded, you would go to that Views tab, and then you would go to the new view, and there'd be image, and then pretty straightforward. You would add your title, English, title French, description French. It's going to give you this filter option, but there's nothing relevant to add in there, so I'm not going to use that. And then image URL. Don't use this basically, but yeah, you can click add, and it will give you your view here as well. So this one pretty straightforward. There's actually at least as far as I'm aware, there's none of these actually live on the portal yet. So certainly looking for a brave first person who has a relevant image that they would like to that they'd like to release. By all means, please go ahead. We're looking forward to seeing some images out there. So I think that is it for the image view. The next one, I'll just turn quickly actually to the questions. Will there be a CSV feature that could auto create charts and stuff like that? Yeah, so to say it, how do I say it? This is just the sort of start of our data preview journey. In the future, we'd like to enable more functionality to allow like more feature-rich previews and different custom visualizations and stuff. These features that we're talking about today are really just like setting a baseline, offering some basic functionality. In the future, we want to do more. It's just how do I say it? Difficult to come up with tools that meet all of the different like sort of GC policy requirements for the web, as well as make it easy enough that you don't have to be like an expert JavaScript developer to come up with a visualization, and that are sort of reusable enough, yeah, to make it worthwhile to implement. So this is just a starting point, though, is the point. Advancing in the deck. So there's also the text preview available. As we saw sort of earlier in the presentation, if you have certain types of text files, you can preview those directly on the portal. Take a look at what that looks like. Here I've added a text document, just a plain TXT file, and it can be previewed here. Like the other previews, you can add a description for the view in Markdown formatting. You can name the view. And then for this one, this is just one of our software licenses off our GitHub page, but this is just a plain text file, and it enables a user to see this in the portal without having to download the file to their computer. This could be particularly useful for mobile users. If you're coming to the portal from a phone or a tablet, you might not want to download a whole bunch of files, so you can view it. Directly here on the page. That's for a plain text. There's also it also supports a few different other formats such as JSON, XML, RDF, HTML, GeoJSON, etc. And it will give you that sort of syntax highlighting that we showed previously before. An example of this is on the algorithmic impact assessments. How do I like it? A lot of these have a JSON file that goes along with them. So here's, for example, a preview of that JSON file for an algorithmic impact assessment. And this is live on the portal now if you're interested in a live example. And as we were saying, it'll give you that syntax highlighting of here on the page. Yeah. It's going to turn to the chat. So Kevin's asking, do we have any accessibility checking of the plain text files? No, we don't have any for that. We would ask that folks do try and follow there is like particular WCAG techniques for releasing plain text files. So it would be great if people took that into consideration when they're releasing their plain text files. Also, for the UX and consumption, is there a guide that provides types of previews and what to include when and that type of thing? So at this stage, we don't have any real guidance to offer. We're in the process of refreshing the Open Government Guidebook, and this will be a portion of the Open Government Guidebook. I do have a little bit of like a cheat sheet that I wrote to sort of provide a little bit of guidance, and I think I should be able to send that out to the community fairly shortly. Yeah. Okay, so that is the text document, the text preview. So as I was mentioning, yeah, it supports text, JSON, RDF, XML, GeoJSON, HTML, and you add those views the same as you would for both the image or the table view. I think we're pretty much done here in the presentation. I think this is the last slide actually that I wanted to talk to you. And just to give you a bit of a flow on what previews are available when. So if we start from the top, a user, a data publisher, a registry user has a resource that they would want to add a view to in the registry. The first sort of decision is that resource uploaded into the data store? By that I mean, is it a CSV that's gone through the validation and has that sort of green badge? If that is yes, then you're allowed to have a view. And for that one, in that case, probably the table view would be the most appropriate view that you'd be looking for. If no, the next sort of decision to consider is that resource in the file store? Meaning, is it a file that's uploaded to the Open Government Portal? If no, then views are not enabled. If it is an uploaded file, then the next question is it an image or a text file? If it's not an image or a text file from the file store, then views are not allowed. If it is an image or a text, and by text I mean all of those types of text files that are viewable in the text preview, then it is allowed to have that text view applied. So just kind of a little visual representation of how that works. So I think that is it. That is the last slide that I have. And we were able to get through the content in right around time. We have a few minutes left before 11. So if there's any additional questions, now is the time. And for folks who don't, thanks very much for attending.